The pot roast was still steaming when the laughter cracked in half. Forks paused mid-air, gravy cooling on porcelain, the Chargers game muted in the living room, and Tara, my son's wife, stood up so abruptly her chair scraped the floor like a warning. "If the old hag doesn't leave, I will!" she shouted, and the words seemed to bounce off the chandelier, hit the framed school photos on the wall, and land right in my lap beside the green beans I had buttered for her. Evan's eyes flinched toward me, then away, and the room took a breath it did not release. Somewhere down the table, my grandniece's bracelet chimed against her glass. I wanted to reach for my water, but my hand would not cooperate. It just trembled on the tablecloth I'd crocheted one winter when Evan still called me Mama, like it was a soft secret he kept. "Excuse me?" I heard myself say, the syllables dry as bone. "What did you call me?" My voice was steady, which surprised me. I had been through enough Midwestern winters and enough widow's paperwork to know that shaking in front of people gives them permission to write your ending. Tara's lipstick was perfect, a crimson line even in fury. "You heard me," she said. "I'm done tiptoeing around. This is our house, our family, and I can't breathe with her underfoot every minute." Evan cleared his throat, which he does when he's buying time, and said, "Tara, that's enough." But he did not stand, and he did not take my hand, and I measured that distance like a seamstress marking out the inches of a new dress no one asked me to sew. The cousins stared at their plates as if the mashed potatoes might rescue them. My sister Carla leaned back, eyes wide, then narrowed, a storm brewing behind her mascara. "Let's all take it down a notch," she murmured, reaching for the basket of rolls as if bread could fix what broke. "We are not doing this tonight." Tara laughed without humor. "Of course you'd say that, Carla. You aren't the one who trips over her teacups and finds her in your kitchen at 6 a.m., reorganizing the cereal because that's the way Ray used to like it." The name of my husband, gone 8 years and still faithful in memory, landed like a glass dropped on tile. "Don't bring Ray into this," I said, sharper than I intended, and my grandson, 12 and trying to be invisible, stared at the salt shaker with such intensity I thought he might disappear into it. "He taught me to make a home," I added, softer now. "He didn't teach me how to be an embarrassment at my own table." Evan finally stood, the chair legs grating in chorus with the first. "We can talk about this later," he said, looking at Tara, not at me. "Mom's done nothing wrong." Tara's jaw set. "She's done nothing but move herself into our lives, that's what. You promised me space, remember? You said after 3 months we'd revisit. It's been a year, Evan." My mouth opened to protest. Because I pay the property taxes? Because it was my down payment that got them this cul-de-sac? Because when Evan lost his job, I didn't ask questions. I just moved my chest of drawers into the guest room and made chicken soup for the week. None of those words came out. "You want me gone," I said instead, to both of them and to myself. "Say it plain." Silence grew a second skin on the room. The baby in the high chair dropped a spoon and wailed, like he understood the ceremony we were ruining. What I remember most is the smell. Rosemary and lemon, the scent of a meal I had made over decades to welcome people home, soured by the metal taste of shame. I remembered the apron strings I tied when Evan had that first-grade Christmas program. How small his head had been beneath the Santa hat. How I had clapped until my hands stung. I remembered the hospital waiting room when Ray's heart attack announced itself like a siren. How Evan had held my shoulder, like it might hold his father on the table. That boy grew into a man who could not look at me as someone called me an old hag. If love is a house, we furnish it with little moments, and I felt the furniture scrape as someone I loved tried to rearrange me to the curb. Carla broke the spell with the authority only an older sister can muster. "We are eating," she said, lifting the carving knife and setting slices of pot roast onto plates with surgical precision. "We are going to eat like civilized people. And then, if anyone has more to say, we will step outside and say it like adults." She met Tara's eyes, then mine, and handed me a plate so neatly garnished it looked like apology. Tara sat, but the air didn't. Evan lowered himself back into his chair, hand hovering over his napkin as if he couldn't decide whether to lift or surrender. "Mom," he said at last, almost under his breath, "we'll figure this out." I nodded as if the words meant anything, though they felt like the duct tape you slap over a pipe when water is already on the floor. I ate because that is what mothers do when the table is full and hearts are empty. I chewed and swallowed and smiled at the children and asked if 7th grade was treating them kindly. I drank water. I passed the corn. I laughed at a joke I didn't hear. Beneath the table, my knee bounced, an old habit from nights when overdue bills lived in a drawer beside grocery lists. I told myself not to cry, because tears can be used as evidence by people looking to declare you dramatic. I told myself to breathe, in and out, like Carla used to coach me during labor. I told myself to remember everything. I watched Tara refill her wine and watched Evan watch her, and I felt the floor tilt a degree I could not name. What I did not do was leave my own table. I stacked plates. I scraped the roasting pan. I held the door for family as they filtered out, a parade of hugs that landed half an inch from my shoulders. When the last car pulled away into the warm November dark, I stood at the sink and stared at my hands until the faucet water ran cold. In the window's reflection, I saw my face and did not recognize the woman who had been voted most dependable in high school, who worked double shifts and learned how to balance a checkbook with 87 cents to her name, who buried a husband and kept a house standing. The house still stood. I wasn't sure about everything else. The night after the dinner felt longer than January. The laughter had not returned to the house. It lingered in pieces, like confetti that someone forgot to sweep up after a cruel celebration. When I closed my bedroom door, I swore I could still hear Tara's voice, sharp as glass, echoing off the hallway walls. The word hag clung to me the way smoke clings to a winter coat. You can scrub and hang it outside, but the scent follows you back in. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the quilt my mother stitched before her arthritis won. Each square was faded now, pale pinks and greens once bright as spring. I used to tell myself the quilt meant family, held you even in sleep. That night, it felt more like a reminder that blood ties can fray, and sometimes the threads you thought were strongest unravel when tugged. The next morning, the house was a museum of silence. Tara avoided me like I was contagious. She drifted through the kitchen, clicking her acrylic nails against her phone, answering texts with a smirk that never lifted when she glanced my way. I brewed coffee, the smell rich and steady, hoping it might coax a word of peace. Evan grabbed his mug, muttered, "Thanks, Mom," without meeting my eyes, and left before the toast even popped. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting. Carla called me that afternoon. "You okay, sis?" she asked, voice cautious, like I was a glass she wasn't sure would hold water. "I'm fine," I lied. She had no right saying that in front of everyone. If Ray were here. "He's not," I cut in too quickly. My throat ached. "And Evan?" He didn't stop her. Carla hesitated. "He's torn, honey. Don't make it easy for her by packing your bags. She wants you rattled." Her words sank in, but they didn't comfort me. Instead, I felt like I was floating above my own life, watching someone else get erased at her own table. That night, I found myself wandering the living room. The photos stared back at me. Evan in his cap and gown, holding the diploma I ironed shirts to pay for. His wedding picture? Tara beaming like the world owed her sunlight. Me standing at their side with pride bigger than the church walls. My eyes burned when I realized Tara had moved some frames, pushing the ones with me farther to the back of the mantel, as if I were already fading into the background of their story. I whispered to the empty room, "Am I really in the way? Or am I just convenient to blame?" No one answered, not even the clock ticking above the fireplace. 2 days later, my niece dropped off a casserole, green bean, her specialty. She hugged me in the doorway and whispered, "Ignore her. Everyone knows what you've done for Evan." "Everyone except Evan," I said, trying to smile. It came out crooked. She squeezed my hand, eyes glassy. "He knows. He's just blind right now." Blind? That word stung worse than hag. Because blindness implies choice. Closing your eyes when someone is right there, waiting to be seen. That evening, I heard hushed voices through the wall. Evan's and Tara's. I didn't lean in, but the words still carried. "She doesn't belong here forever, Evan. You promised." "I said we'd talk about it, Tara. Don't push." "Don't push? She's suffocating us. I won't raise our kids in her shadow." I sat perfectly still, as if any movement might collapse the house. I wanted to knock, to demand answers, to ask Evan when I became a ghost, haunting my own family. Instead, I pulled the quilt tighter, as if stitches from another era could protect me now. The days blurred. I went through motions, folding laundry, sweeping floors, cooking dinners no one praised. But every smile felt borrowed, every step measured, as if one wrong move might hand Tara more ammunition. Relatives texted me politely, "Are you okay?" "Ignore her, Aunt May. Don't take it to heart." Their words skimmed the surface, never diving deep enough to touch the real wound. One night, I dreamed of Ray. He stood at the end of a long hallway, face hidden by shadow. I called to him, asked what I should do. He lifted a hand, not in farewell, but in warning. I woke with my chest tight, the image so vivid I swore he had tried to tell me something urgent. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, Tara looked up from her phone. For the first time since the dinner, she smiled directly at me. It wasn't kind. It wasn't even polite. It was the smile of someone certain they were winning. And that's when I knew this silence was not peace. It was preparation. The week after the shouting match settled into something I could only call an uneasy peace. The house looked the same. Neat flower beds out front, clean kitchen counters, the faint lemon polish I rubbed into the dining table every Saturday. But beneath the surface, it buzzed with unspoken tension. It was like living on a frozen lake, the ice smooth and white, but every step carried the threat of cracking straight through. Tara moved like a queen in her own castle. She clattered dishes a little louder when I walked in, sighed dramatically when I lingered too long near the television, and left her shoes in the middle of the hallway so I'd stumble. She didn't need to say anything. Her message was clear. You don't belong here. Evan, caught in the middle, tried to stitch over the growing rift with small kindnesses, bringing me coffee on a Sunday, asking if I needed anything from the store. But his eyes always darted toward Tara, as though seeking permission. His attempts felt less like love and more like damage control. One afternoon, I baked apple pie, the way Ray used to like it, cinnamon heavy, crust fluted with care. I placed it on the counter, waiting for the sweet smell to remind us all of warmth. Tara came in, sniffed, and said, "We're cutting sugar, Evan and I. You know how bad carbs are for kids these days." She lifted her water glass like a toast. "But I'm sure the neighbors will love it if you share." The smile she gave me was all teeth. I wrapped the pie in foil later that night and left it on the Johnsons' porch down the street. Mrs. Johnson sent me a thank you note with daisies drawn in the margins. The note made me cry more than the pie ever could. Inside, the silence turned sharp. Meals were eaten in fragments. Tara with her phone at the island, Evan rushing through a sandwich before work, me alone at the dining table set for one. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing together late at night, voices muffled behind their closed door. The sound threaded into my dreams, leaving me restless and hollow come morning. It was during one of those restless mornings that the phone rang. An unfamiliar voice asked for Evan, then paused when I explained he was at work. "This is about the refinancing paperwork," the man said. "We just need him to sign the final forms to close on the loan." My hand tightened on the receiver. "Refinancing?" I asked. The man hesitated. "Oh, I thought you'd know. It's for the property at 312 Maple." That was my address. Our house. My breath caught, but I forced a neutral tone. "Please call back when he's available," I said, and hung up. My heart pounded like a drum. For the rest of the day, I moved through chores like a ghost. I folded laundry, scrubbed the sink, wiped down windows until they gleamed, but none of it quieted the storm in my chest. Refinancing meant debt. It meant risk. And it meant Evan had made a decision about the house without telling me. Without asking me. My fingers itched to dig through drawers and find the truth, but I stopped myself. I wasn't ready to know the extent of it. Not yet. That evening, Evan came home with groceries. I caught him alone in the garage unloading bags. "Evan," I said carefully, "did someone call today? From the bank?" His eyes flicked up, surprised, then softened in a way that told me he'd been preparing for this. "Yeah, Mom. Nothing serious. Just some paperwork. It's better this way. Better rates. Helps us with the mortgage." "Our mortgage?" I asked, voice thin. "Mom, please don't worry. I've got it handled." He smiled the way little boys do when they're caught stealing cookies. Except he wasn't a boy anymore, and this wasn't a cookie. I wanted to scream, to demand the whole truth, but Tara appeared at the door, holding a carton of eggs. "Dinner's not going to cook itself," she said, sliding past me without so much as a glance. Evan's expression shifted, closing like a book. I knew then that any words between us would only be half spoken, half heard, until the day the silence finally shattered. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan turning its endless circles. My chest ached with questions. What had he signed? How deep were they in? How much of my security had been gambled away in the name of their future? The quilt pulled heavy around me, but no comfort came. I thought of Ray again, how he used to fix leaks before they became floods, and I whispered into the dark, "What else are they hiding?" The fan kept turning, and I knew this uneasy peace would not last. The call from the bank had planted itself in my chest like a splinter. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, each heartbeat pressed it deeper. For days, I carried the question around like contraband. What had Evan signed, and why hadn't he told me? On a gray Thursday morning, I couldn't hold it back anymore. The house was empty. Evan at work, Tara gone to her yoga class. I brewed coffee I didn't want, my hands restless, and finally opened the desk drawer in the study. Evan kept papers there, and I'd respected his privacy until respect felt like self-betrayal. Bills, coupons, a stack of unopened envelopes. I sifted through until I found a thick manila folder labeled in Tara's neat handwriting. Home. My stomach dropped. Inside were documents with my name bold at the top. May Collins, property owner of 312 Maple. Only these weren't the deed and tax records I'd tucked safely in my bedroom chest. These were loan agreements, mortgages, refinancing approvals. The numbers swam before me. 6 figures, interest rates, terms I had learned to fear when Ray and I first bought this house with hope and thin paychecks. But one line burned brighter than the rest. Collateral, primary residence. My hands shook. They had mortgaged my house, my security, my legacy. The place Ray and I built from foundation to chimney. The place where Evan had taken his first steps on creaky wood floors, where every nail carried sweat from our hands. And I had not signed a thing. That's when I saw it. My name, written in black ink at the bottom of a signature page. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. The letters looped wrong, the Y too sharp, the flourish uneven. Someone had forged me. I pressed my palm over my mouth to smother the cry rising inside me. For a moment, the room spun. The wallpaper seemed to tilt. The window blinds flickered. Forgery. Fraud. Betrayal that wasn't just emotional, but legal. The kind of betrayal that could leave me homeless in the eyes of the law. I heard the front door slam. Tara's voice floated in, bright and casual. "Honey, I'm home." My pulse spiked. I shoved the folder back into the drawer and shut it fast, my breath ragged. My hands still smelled of paper and ink. Later that evening, I tried to steady myself as we sat at the dinner table. Evan chewed quietly, eyes tired, while Tara scrolled on her phone between bites of chicken. I set my fork down. "I found the mortgage papers," I said softly. Evan froze. Tara looked up, face unreadable. "What do you mean, Mom?" Evan asked. "You know what I mean. You used this house. My house. And my name is on documents I never signed." For a beat, no one spoke. Then Tara smirked. "You must be mistaken. The bank wouldn't process anything without your consent." "My consent?" I snapped, the words slicing through the air. "Do you call forgery consent?" Evan rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please. It's not what you think. We needed a better rate. Tara and I—" "You forged my name, Evan?" My voice trembled, not with weakness, but with something older, stronger. "Do you understand what that means?" His fork clattered against the plate. "It was just paperwork. We were desperate. Tara's business loan fell through. The credit cards were maxed." "So you gambled with the roof over my head?" I asked. "The home your father and I built." Silence pressed in. Tara leaned back, arms crossed. "Don't be dramatic. It's all under control. You live here rent-free. You should be grateful we're keeping things afloat." The words hit me harder than the forged signature. Rent-free, as if my decades of sacrifice, the down payment I had scraped together, the years of double shifts and sleepless nights, all amounted to me being a freeloader in my own home. I stood so abruptly the chair legs screeched. "Grateful?" My voice cracked the air. "Grateful that you steal my name, my home, and call it generosity?" My chest heaved. "Evan, look at me. Look at me." He lifted his eyes, full of shame and something worse, cowardice. "I'm sorry, Mom. We thought we could fix it before you ever knew." "And if you couldn't," I whispered, "where would I go then?" The room seemed smaller, suffocating. Tara reached across the table and took Evan's hand, her nails flashing red. She looked at me with triumph hidden behind false sweetness. "You'll always have us, May. Don't worry. We'll take care of everything." Her words were honey poured over arsenic. I saw it then. The plan, the manipulation, the future she was carving with my walls as collateral. That night, alone in my room, I sat on the quilt again, fingers tracing worn stitches. My body shook with rage and disbelief. My son had signed away my home. His wife had forged my name. and the family I thought I'd built on sacrifice and love was crumbling from the inside. I closed my eyes, and Ray's warning hand from my dream returned. Not farewell, warning. I finally understood. This wasn't silence anymore. This was war. The next morning, the house smelled of pancakes, Tara's favorite tactic when she wanted to gloss over a wound. I sat at the table with my coffee, hands clasped tight around the mug, as if its warmth might anchor me. Evan shuffled in, hair mussed, avoiding my eyes. Tara slid a plate in front of him, kissed his temple, and said, "Eat before work." Her voice was all sugar, but her glance at me was flint. I had rehearsed all night, lines looping through my head until dawn. Ask him why. Demand the truth. Make him choose. But when my mouth opened, the words tumbled out raw. "Evan, why did you do it?" His fork froze midair. "Do what?" "The loan," I said. My voice came sharper than I intended. "The forgery. My name on papers I didn't sign." Tara's smile flickered. Then she leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Honestly, May, you're blowing this out of proportion." I turned to Evan. "Look at me. I need to hear it from you." Finally, he did. His eyes, once so eager to meet mine when he was a boy, showing me a good grade or a Little League trophy, now brimmed with exhaustion and shame. "We didn't have a choice, Mom. The bills were drowning us. Tara's business needed capital. We thought we'd manage the payments before you ever found out." "Didn't have a choice?" My voice cracked. "You had a dozen choices. You could have come to me. We could have found another way. Instead, you stole my name, my security." Tara snorted. "Security? You still live in the past, May. This house isn't some sacred temple. It's a property, an asset. We're using it smartly, leveraging what we have." "Leveraging?" I repeated. My hands trembled against the mug. "This house isn't numbers on paper. It's where Ray and I built a life. It's where Evan grew up. You've turned it into poker chips." The silence stretched. Evan rubbed his temples, muttering, "Can we not do this right now?" I stood. "If not now, when? After the bank takes the keys?" His face reddened. "It's not going to come to that." "You can't promise that." My voice rose, echoing off the walls. I felt the years of sacrifice rushing back. Every bill paid late so he could have soccer cleats. Every meal stretched thin so he wouldn't know hunger. "I worked 2 jobs to keep this roof over your head, Evan. I buried your father and still kept us afloat. And this is how you repay me? By signing it all away?" He slammed his fork down, the clang ringing like a gavel. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy watching Tara stressed, creditors calling every day, feeling like I can't provide? I did what I had to do for my family. For your family, or for her?" The words cut out before I could stop them. The look on his face told me I'd struck home. Tara's voice slithered in, low and calm. "You're right, May. He did it for us. Because we're building a future. Something you don't seem to understand. Times change. Traditions don't pay mortgages." Her tone burned hotter than her words. I turned to her, jaw tight. "And forging my name? Was that your idea of building a future?" She didn't answer, just tilted her head, lips curved in a smile that dared me to prove it. For a heartbeat, I saw Ray in my memory, his calloused hands gripping mine after we signed the original deed, his quiet promise that this house would always be our anchor. Now, that anchor felt hacked loose, drifting in a storm. I whispered, more to myself than them, "You've taken something you can't give back." Evan's chair scraped as he stood, his voice desperate. "Mom, please, don't make this worse." I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't see my little boy. I saw a man I barely recognized, standing beside a woman who had turned him against me with whispered promises of freedom and success. I set the mug down with deliberate care. You've already made it worse, Evan. The question is how much farther you'll go. Neither of them spoke. The pancakes cooled, untouched. I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding, my mind already shifting from grief to resolve. They thought I was powerless. They thought shame would silence me. But silence was what had brought me here, and I would not make that mistake again. Behind me, I heard Tara mutter under her breath, just loud enough to sting. She won't do anything. She never does. In that moment, I knew they were wrong. The house felt colder after that morning, as if the very walls had pulled back from me. For days, Tara floated around with smug calm, humming as she scrolled her phone, her triumph hidden but pulsing like a heartbeat. Evan kept to himself, working late, avoiding the weight of my gaze. I went through the motions, watering plants, folding towels, making dinner. But inside, something had shifted. The humiliation still burned, but beneath it grew a new fire. Resolve. I started small. Each evening, after they went upstairs, I sat at the dining table with a notebook. I listed every bill I'd paid, every repair I had covered, every year of taxes in my name. The stack of records I pulled from my chest in the bedroom became my quiet army. Deeds, receipts, copies of checks, proof that this house was more mine than theirs. Proof that my life's work couldn't be erased with forged ink. Still, paper only went so far. I needed someone to guide me, someone who knew more than I did about signatures and banks. My pride resisted, but desperation won. I called Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor 2 doors down, a retired paralegal with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "May, you sound like you've swallowed nails," she said when she picked up. "I need help," I admitted, my voice cracking. "Evan and Tara, they've done something with the house. I found documents with my name forged." There was silence on the line, then a firm inhale. "Bring everything over tomorrow. Don't wait." The next morning, I carried the folder across the street tucked under my arm, feeling like a spy in my own neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson spread the papers across her kitchen table, adjusting her glasses. Her frown deepened with each page. "This is bad," she said finally. "If they default, the bank could seize the property, and this," she tapped the false signature, "is fraud, plain and simple. Forgery's a felony, May." The word felony clanged in my ears. I had raised my son to mow lawns for pocket money, to say thank you, to hold doors for his elders. And now, I was staring at evidence that tied him to crime. My chest tightened, but Mrs. Henderson's hand found mine. "Don't crumble now," she said. "You have rights. This house is yours. If you want, I can put you in touch with an attorney who owes me a favor." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without trembling. "Yes," I said. "Please." Walking back home, autumn leaves crunching beneath my shoes, I felt taller somehow, stronger. The shame that had weighed on me at that dinner table began to lift, replaced by a determination Ray would have recognized. He always said I had a backbone of steel under all my kindness. Maybe I had forgotten it. Maybe Tara had too, but I would remind her. Inside, the silence still stretched, but it no longer suffocated me. When Tara shot me one of her victorious little smiles, I met it with steady eyes. When Evan muttered excuses about overtime, I simply nodded, recording each absence like evidence. They thought they'd beaten me down, but I was already gathering the pieces of my counterattack. Late one night, I pulled out a photo album, Evan as a toddler with cake smeared across his cheeks, me holding him while Ray laughed behind the camera. My throat ached as I traced the edges of the photo. How had that little boy grown into a man capable of stealing from his own mother? The grief was real, but it hardened into resolve. If protecting him meant losing myself, then I could no longer protect him. I whispered into the dark, "You chose her, Evan. Now I have to choose me." The next morning, I placed a fresh folder of my own documents in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Tax returns, notarized deeds, even old photographs with dates scrawled on the back. A quiet arsenal, waiting. I wasn't ready to strike yet, but when the moment came, I would not come empty-handed. And as I closed the drawer, a calm thought settled over me, sharp and clear. Tara had declared war, but she didn't know who she was fighting. The first snow of the season arrived the same evening our family gathered again. Not for a holiday, not for celebration, just a Sunday dinner at Carla's, meant to smooth things over. She called it peacemaking. I knew better. Family dinners had become battlefields disguised with tablecloths. Carla's house smelled of cinnamon and roast chicken, warm enough to thaw the cold air that followed me in. Cousins unzipped coats, children scattered to the den, laughter bubbled in corners. On the surface, it looked like family. But when Tara swept through the doorway, heels clicking, I felt the tension ripple. Her hand clung to Evan's arm like a claim. She kissed Carla's cheek, her smile polished, and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "We're so grateful you hosted. It gives us all space." Space. The word landed like a slap. I stayed quiet through appetizers, forcing myself to nod at small talk. But silence is its own weapon, and tonight it pressed so heavy on my chest that even Carla noticed. She reached for my hand under the table, giving it a squeeze. Her eyes said, "Hold on." Halfway through the meal, Tara began again. "It's just not sustainable, you know? 3 adults in one house. The kids need their own rooms. Privacy matters." She sipped her wine, eyes flicking to me with the faintest curl of triumph. I set my fork down. "Privacy matters," I repeated. "So does honesty." The table hushed. Evan shifted in his seat. "Mom?" "No, Evan." My voice trembled, but it carried. "It's time." I reached into my bag and placed the folder of documents on the table. Paper slid against wood, crisp and undeniable. "I know about the refinancing. I know my name was forged. And I know the house your father and I built is now on the line because of your choices." Gasps rose around the table. Carla's hand flew to her mouth. A cousin muttered, "Oh my God." Evan's face drained of color. "Mom, please, not here." "Yes, here." My voice sharpened. Because it started in front of everyone, Tara shouting I should leave, humiliating me at my own table. If this family is going to watch me be torn down, they'll also watch me stand. Tara laughed, brittle and cold. "You're making a scene. How embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" I turned on her. What's embarrassing is forging a woman's name, stealing her home, then daring to call her ungrateful when she notices. Carla slammed her glass down. "Is this true?" she demanded, staring at Evan. Evan's lips parted, but no words came. His silence spoke louder than anything. Tara leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You think they'll side with you? You've been mooching off us for a year. Rent-free, cooking meals no one asked for, rearranging cabinets like it's still your kingdom. Evan and I are the future. You're just the past." The words sliced clean. My breath hitched, but fury steadied me. "The past? Let me remind you, Tara, the past is what kept you in a house at all. The past paid every mortgage, every tax bill, every repair before you even knew Evan's name. The past built the very floor under your feet, and you—" My voice cracked, raw. "You've turned my love into leverage." Evan finally spoke, his voice low. "Mom, stop, please, you're tearing us apart." I turned to him, my heart breaking. "I'm tearing us apart? Evan, you already chose. You chose silence when she called me an old hag. You chose deceit when you forged my name. You chose her dreams over my roof. I didn't tear us apart. You did." The room stilled. Carla's children peeked in from the den, wide-eyed at the thunder in adult voices. My chest rose and fell, breath ragged. I wanted to collapse into grief, but something stronger held me upright. The certainty that I had finally spoken the truth, the certainty that my silence had ended. Tara broke it with a sneer. "You can scream all you want. At the end of the day, the papers are signed. The house is ours to manage. You can't undo that." Her confidence rang like a bell. But bells can toll for the living or the dead, and I swore hers sounded more like the latter. I gathered the folder back into my bag, meeting her gaze steadily. "We'll see," I said. My voice didn't shake. "We'll see who this family sides with when the truth is dragged into the light." For the first time that night, it was Tara who looked away. The week after Carla's dinner felt like the long pause before a storm. Tara walked lighter, smug in her certainty that my fury would fade into submission, just as she expected. Evan avoided me almost completely, his shame now armor, his silences thicker than walls. But I had already shifted. I was no longer waiting for their scraps of kindness. I was gathering my own weapons. Mrs. Henderson had introduced me to her attorney friend, Mr. Ramirez, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes and a voice steady as a gavel. I sat in his office, clutching my folder, while he leafed through every page. When he reached the forged signature, he raised a brow. "Whoever did this wasn't careful," he said. "This is forgery, clear as day. It's a felony offense. And since you never consented, the bank documents are voidable. You still hold primary claim over the property." I blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. "So, I could lose the house?" "Not if you act. If you stay silent, yes. But if you file, you take back control. You have the power, Mrs. Collins. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words burned into me like fire in cold lungs. For the first time in weeks, I felt not just defensive, but powerful. I didn't plan the reckoning. It arrived on its own, wrapped in the irony of a birthday party. My grandson was turning 13, and Carla insisted the celebration happen at their house again. Neutral ground. The entire family came. Siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews. Even neighbors dropped by, bringing balloons and cakes. It should have been joyful. And yet, the moment I walked in and saw Tara arranging candles on the cake like she owned the air, I knew the stage had been set. After the gifts were opened and the cake was eaten, chatter swelled. Kids darted outside into the snow, leaving the adults to their wine and gossip. That was when Tara, in her perfectly timed way, sighed dramatically and said, "We really need more space at home. Evan and I are looking into new layouts. Once things settle, maybe May can find something more suitable for her." It was not said cruelly, but with calculated politeness, the kind that sharpens a blade rather than hides it. The room quieted, eyes darting to me. A test, an ambush disguised as civility. I stood slowly, my knees aching but steady. "Actually," I said, voice carrying clear, "that won't be happening. Because this house, the one you think you control, is still mine." Murmurs rippled. Tara's smile faltered. Evan's head snapped toward me. I opened my bag and pulled out the folder, laying it on the coffee table with deliberate weight. "These are the forged documents. My name, faked, to push through a loan I never agreed to. And here," I held up another set, notarized deeds, tax receipts, photographs. is every piece of proof that this property belongs to me, not you. Not the bank, not anyone else. Me. Gasps circled the room. Carla whispered, "Good Lord." Evan stood, face red. "Mom, please, not in front of everyone." "Yes, in front of everyone." My voice cracked like thunder. "Because you let your wife humiliate me in front of this family, calling me an old hag at my own table. You let her treat me like an intruder in the house I built. And worse, you stood silent while my name was stolen and my future put at risk." Tara tried to laugh. "This is pathetic. No one here is going to believe you." But her voice wavered. Because the papers sat in plain sight, and Mrs. Henderson herself had come to the party, standing now in the corner with arms crossed, her reputation lending weight. I turned to the family, my voice steadier with every word. "I am not leaving my home. I am not the burden Tara wants you to think I am. I am a woman who worked herself raw to raise a son, buried a husband, and kept a roof over heads when storms came, and I will not be erased." Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then Carla spoke, sharp as a knife. "You forged her name, Tara?" All eyes turned. Tara flushed, opened her mouth, but Evan stepped forward. His voice cracked. "It was me. I signed it. I thought it would fix everything." The room buzzed, shock unraveling. Tara's eyes widened with fury. "You idiot!" she hissed. For a moment, the betrayal twisted deeper. My own son confessing. But then, strangely, relief. Because the truth was no longer hidden. And truth, once spoken, is a weapon no lie can cage. I looked at Evan, my heart breaking even as steel lined my words. "You chose lies over me, but tonight, I choose myself." I turned to Carla. "Ramirez is already preparing the filings. The bank will be notified. The documents will be voided. Tara's schemes end here." Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into nods. The family's eyes shifted, not pitying, not doubting, but supportive. For the first time in months, I wasn't alone. Tara's face hardened. "You'll regret this." "No," I said quietly, my voice steady as the snow outside. "I regret nothing except trusting you for too long." And with that, I gathered my papers and left the room, the stunned silence of family trailing behind me. For once, it was not me who carried shame out the door. The days that followed the party felt like waking after a long fever. The air was clearer, the weight lighter, though my heart still carried the ache of betrayal. Mr. Ramirez filed the necessary papers. Within a week, the bank acknowledged the forged signature and froze the loan process. My home was safe, at least for now. I sat on the porch with Carla one afternoon, the cold biting our cheeks, as she handed me the official notice. "You did it," she said simply. I nodded, fingers tracing the bold stamp on the page. Relief seeped in, mingling with grief. "I shouldn't have had to," I whispered. Word spread quickly through the family. Cousins who had once averted their eyes when Tara spoke now sent me messages of support. Neighbors who had whispered about tension in the house offered casseroles, rides, even just company. For the first time in months, I felt a net around me, not a net of obligation, but one of choice and loyalty. But inside the house, the walls cracked. Evan moved with hollow eyes, weighed down by shame. He avoided me, but I caught glimpses. Him sitting on the edge of the bed, head in hands. Him staring at the floor when Tara barked at him to fix this mess. Their whispers turned to arguments, then arguments to slammed doors. One evening, as I folded laundry in the living room, Evan finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost childlike. "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked up. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed red. "Sorry won't erase ink on a page, Evan." "I know." He sank onto the couch, hands fidgeting. I thought I was protecting us. I thought if I could give Tara what she wanted, maybe I could keep the peace. Peace built on lies isn't peace, I said softly. It's a cage, and you locked me inside it without asking. He flinched. I see that now. I studied him, the boy who once begged me to watch every baseball practice, the teenager who sulked but always returned with a sheepish hug, the man who had lost himself in someone else's vision of success. My heart ached, but the steel in me remained. You have to decide who you are, Evan. I can't do it for you anymore. Tara stormed in then, phone pressed to her ear. This is ridiculous, she snapped. The bank says the process is stalled, and it's because of her. She jabbed a finger at me. She's ruining everything. I folded the towel in my lap, calm. What's ruined is your illusion that you could erase me. The house is not yours to gamble. Her voice rose. You think this is over? You embarrassed me in front of the family. You made Evan look weak. I didn't make him look weak, I cut in. My gaze turned to my son. His choices did. Tara's eyes flashed with fury. You'll regret this. She stormed upstairs, the slam of the bedroom door rattling the frames on the wall. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hopeless. Evan stayed seated, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor. After a long pause, he whispered, She wants me to choose between you and her. My throat tightened. And what will you choose? His silence was answer enough. I stood, my hands steady. Then I'll make my own choice. I will not live in fear in my own home. If she stays, I leave, but the house, this house, remains mine. For the first time, his eyes lifted, pained. Mom, I touched his shoulder, a gesture both final and tender. I love you, but love doesn't mean letting someone destroy me. In the weeks that followed, Tara's temper burned hotter. Neighbors whispered about fights loud enough to carry down the street. Eventually, one morning, I came downstairs to find her suitcases by the door. Evan stood beside them, pale and silent. Tara's lips pressed thin as she brushed past me, muttering, Enjoy your victory, old woman. The door slammed behind her, and she was gone. Evan stayed frozen in the hallway, eyes empty. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. She left, he said flatly. I nodded. Sometimes the poison leaves on its own. Tears filled his eyes, and for a moment I thought he might collapse. But I didn't rush to comfort him, not this time. He would have to reckon with his choices, with the cracks he'd carved into both of us. That night, I sat on the porch again, wrapped in a blanket, watching snow drift under the lamplight. The house behind me stood steady, safe. For the first time in months, I felt like it was mine again, not just in law, but in spirit. Justice hadn't come as handcuffs or headlines. It came in truth revealed, in power reclaimed, in the quiet satisfaction of still standing when others tried to erase me. I whispered into the cold night, a promise to Ray, to myself. I am still here. The house was quiet again, but not with the suffocating silence that had haunted me for months. This quiet felt like rest, like the hush after a storm when the air smells cleaner, sharper, and the ground is littered with broken branches you can finally see clearly. Tara's suitcases had rolled out the door weeks ago, her perfume no longer clinging to the curtains, her laughter no longer echoing through the halls. The absence was a kind of peace, though it came wrapped in grief for all that had been broken along the way. Evan stayed. At first, he walked the rooms like a shadow, haunted by choices he couldn't undo. He offered apologies often, words heavy but insufficient. as if saying sorry could plaster over cracks in a foundation. I listened, sometimes with tears, sometimes with silence. I knew he needed to feel the weight of what he had done, but I also knew he was still my son. A mother's love bends under storms, but it doesn't disappear. One evening, we sat at the dining table together, just the two of us. He stared at the empty chair where Tara used to sit, then whispered, "I don't know who I am without her." I reached across, laying my hand over his. "You're still the boy who once built me a card out of construction paper that said, 'World's Strongest Mom.' You're still the man who held me up when your father passed. But you're also someone who lost his way. And now, you have to find your way back, not to me, but to yourself." His eyes brimmed, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the son I remembered. He nodded, slowly, as if the truth was heavy, but necessary. Rebuilding trust was not a single moment. It was a series of small ones. Evan began helping more around the house, unprompted. He cooked dinner twice a week, awkward but earnest. He repaired the leaky faucet I had been ignoring. He lingered in the living room at night, sometimes just sitting quietly while I knitted, the television humming in the background. We didn't need to fill the silence. Being present was enough. Still, I knew better than to tie my peace to him. For too long, my identity had been wrapped around sacrifice, around being a mother, a wife, the dependable one. Now, I wanted something more, something mine. I joined a local community group for widows. We met on Thursday evenings at the library, trading stories over coffee in styrofoam cups. At first, I only listened, but slowly I began to share. When I told them about the forged papers, the humiliation, the betrayal, their eyes filled with the same fury I had felt. But then, they nodded with knowing, with recognition. And in their company, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was growing. Spring came. I planted daffodils along the walkway, their yellow trumpets bright against the soil. As I knelt, pressing bulbs into earth, I thought of Ray. He had always said flowers were proof of resilience, that even after the coldest winter, something beautiful could push its way back through. I felt that in my bones now. One Sunday, Evan joined me on the porch. We watched the daffodils sway in the breeze. He cleared his throat, nervous. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." I smiled faintly. "You're my son. But love isn't the same as trust. That you'll have to earn." His shoulders sagged, but he nodded. "I will." And I believed he meant it. That night, I sat at my writing desk, with the window cracked, cool air drifting in. I opened a fresh journal and wrote one sentence on the first page. "This is the beginning of my life again." The words felt both strange and liberating. For the first time, my story wasn't only about survival. It was about renewal. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like mine again. Walls holding laughter, not insults. Rooms holding hope, not schemes. I knew there would still be hard days, and that forgiveness would take time. But I also knew something else. I had survived humiliation, betrayal, and the threat of being erased. And I had stood, louder and stronger, until the truth set me free. As I closed the journal, I whispered to the quiet house, "I am still here, and I am enough." The daffodils nodded outside the window, as if they agreed.